everybody. Thank you for joining us on CELPIP Live. You know we start each episode with some trivia, so here's your question for the day. The only dessert in Canada is located where? The only dessert in Canada is located where? Let me know the answer in the comments below. You can also share this image and your answer on Instagram with the hashtag CELPIPLive, and we may feature it on our feed. I will reveal the response at the end of our segment. For now, let's start our show. Welcome. CELPIP Live is an interactive YouTube series made to help CELPIP test takers understand more about the CELPIP test. So if you're about to write the test, please subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as we go live. In today's episode, we're discussing task 1 of the writing section. Brandy is back and ready to guide you on writing an email. Let's go say hello to her. Hi, Brandy. How are you doing? Welcome back to CELPIP Live.
Hello, Ashwati. I'm very well, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing great. So I'm going to let you get started. For the people who are watching, if you have questions, please write it down in the comments below. I see some of you are already reaching out to say hello. Hello. And if you have any questions, Brandy can answer it after her lesson. Brandy, you're up.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, everybody. So please give me just a moment to do that. Okay, so while I go through my presentation, I won't be able to see any questions and comments that you're making live, but we will come back to them at the end of the session. So please feel free to share whatever you'd like. We are going to focus today on writing task 1, which is writing an email. And before we actually start writing that email, there are just a few things I wanted to mention about what you can expect when you take this part of the test. So first of all, the question on the test itself will always be about some sort of everyday situation, whether it's a situation at work or in the community. So that will form the topic that you're going to write about. It will be something you should be able to relate to easily. There won't be anything personal or controversial there. So I wanted to reassure our viewers that that's what they can expect. You will have 27 minutes to finish the entire task from start to finish. And there is also a word count that you're expected to meet. So the instructions ask you to write between 150 and 200 words on the test itself. You'll see a live word counter right on the computer screen. So as you're typing your answer, the computer will let you know when you've fulfilled that word requirement. So what I'd like to do is share with you a real test question from a past test. We're going to read through this question together, and then we're going to talk about how we can organize our answer. We're going to actually write out a response to this question today for practice purposes. So I'm hoping by the time we're finished today, you have a better understanding of the writing process and also what readers are looking for as they read over your work on the test. So here is our sample test question for today. There will always be some background information on the test screen itself. So I'll read that out loud. You can see it here in blue. It says, you recently made reservations for dinner at a very famous and expensive restaurant in town. However, the meal and the service were terrible. The restaurant manager was not available to solve the problem, so you left without a resolution. Here are your test instructions. So you are told that you will be writing an email to the restaurant's manager in about 150 to 200 words. Your email should do the following things. State what problems you had with the food you ordered, complain about the service, and describe how you want the restaurant to resolve the problem to your satisfaction. Now, on the test itself, it might take you about 30 seconds or so to read that through, and I'm hoping that you're already starting to think about some of your own dining experiences. So if you've got some examples in mind about a really terrible meal you had out, those are the types of details you're going to use in your writing. Feel free to share some of those now if you want in the live feed as we go along. Now, the raters, as they give you a score for your answer, they're going to look for 4 specific categories or dimensions. The first thing they're going to look at is your content and coherence. So the content will include the number of ideas that you're writing about. Now, in task 1 for the writing, We're lucky in the sense that the computer instructions tell us how many ideas to use. We were told to complain about the food, complain about the service, and ask for some sort of a solution. So we will have those 3 main ideas for the writing itself. And each of those ideas will be discussed in its own separate paragraph. So that part's been given to us. What we have to do, though, is come up with our own examples and details. So this would be the quality of your writing, the quality of your ideas. So again, start thinking about a terrible meal you had. What was wrong with it? Be very specific. Did you order garlic bread as an appetizer and it had green mold on the top of it? That's a very specific and disgusting example of a problem with food. So this is what I mean when we say examples and very good quality, very specific ideas. And of course, how well we organize those ideas is important. I think in writing task 1, if you follow the same order that those bulleted points are presented to you in the instructions, it makes sense. So if we first complain about the food, then the service, and then ask for that solution, that would be one way to organize the answer in a logical way. So on the test itself, remember you have 27 minutes. So before you even start typing out your answer, I would recommend you take about 3 minutes or so of time and create a short outline. You will be given a piece of paper and a pen at the test itself. And using those, I would encourage you to create, again, write down your main ideas so you can see how they're going to be organized before you even start typing. So because we are writing an email, it's very customary in the first paragraph of an email to include a couple of background details. So you're going to base this on the situation in the test question. So we know we were at an expensive restaurant and had a terrible time. So you're going to create some details there in that first paragraph to extend on that a little bit. You're also going to introduce the purpose for writing right here in your opening. So at some point in this first paragraph, we need to indicate that we had terrible food and service and we would like a resolution. So once we've done that, we move on to the meat of the email, the actual details. So that second paragraph will only discuss the specific examples of the awful food you didn't enjoy. The third paragraph will complain about the service. So think about very specific examples of the service that was just awful. And again, in an email, our fourth paragraph usually will summarize briefly the main point that you made. But in this case as well, the test instructions asked us to make a request for a solution. So we're going to put that forth in this conclusion in the last paragraph. And again, in an email, it's customary in this situation to leave your contact information. So that could be considered your next step if you ask the manager to contact you if they need further information. So before we start typing, if you know what your email is going to look like on paper, or in this case on the computer screen, you're going to save yourself a lot of time. Now, I think on the test situation, a lot of us would just start with that outline in mind. You would just start typing in your email and add your details as you go. While we're studying today, I'd like to break it down paragraph by paragraph and look at the level of detail that would really enhance your response. So we'll start with paragraph 1, our introduction. And remember, we're supposed to give some background information, just a brief sentence or two to establish the context. And again, that comes right from the computer. We're at a restaurant, remember. So I think in an opening, it's very common and very easy to answer those 5 W questions. So if you can establish the who, what, where, when, and why in your opening, the reader is going to understand the purpose for your writing a lot better. So this is where, again, you're going to come up with these details. You know you were in a restaurant according to the test instructions. You can decide who was there with you as you write. Let's just say it's your family. And as you're writing, be specific. So a family could mean different things to different people. If this were my email, maybe I would make up that I was there with my husband and my son. So the 3 of us were out at a restaurant to have a meal. I'm going to specify when I get to writing that my son is a teenager. Again, adding these little details give more precision, give more specific details that make the writing more interesting. It takes just a second to throw them in. So rather than just say my son, I'll say my teenage son, so that the reader can imagine that scene in their mind as they look at my email. I can explain when we were there at the restaurant. I think it's logical to have it happen recently. So let's just say it happened yesterday evening. We can explain where it was. Now, the restaurant manager knows fully where his restaurant is clearly, but I think, again, as a written document, it will take us but a moment to explain we were at an Italian restaurant, and I'm going to make up a name for this restaurant. I'll call it Valentino's. Again, just to add some detail to the response. The why we were there could be interesting, but also set the stage for the reader. So if I explain to the restaurant manager that we were there to celebrate my son's graduation, I can specify perhaps high school graduation. I'm really establishing the case that we were looking forward to a nice special event and a nice meal, but we didn't get the delicious meal we wanted. And that's why we want a refund or what have you. Okay, so that's why these details can be important. They're interesting, but they also establish your purpose for writing. So now we come to the most important part here. We have to establish what happened. So we're going to indicate that there was terrible food and service, and the instructions on the test ask us to make some sort of a request for a solution. So at this point in your writing, I'm hoping that you're thinking about a logical solution. Some of us might just request a refund for the bill we paid. Some of us might want a gift card. So it's up to you, but make sure it's a logical solution. And I think as I'm outlining these ideas in my mind for writing, I think what I'll do in my opening is just indicate I would like some sort of a resolution. In my closing paragraph, I'm going to state directly that I'd like a refund. I don't think I'll ask for a refund in my opening because I'm worried that my reader will be offended or angry. If I ask for a refund first, before even explaining the problems with food and service, I haven't yet established the reason to justify that refund. So I'm choosing to mention specifically the refund at the end. But I will indicate in my opening that I'd like something done because we had a terrible time. So these ideas are what you're going into the test with. Okay, again, you might take the time to write out a few ideas on paper if you'd like. A lot of us would just have them in our minds and we start typing. So I'll show you what an introductory paragraph could look like based on the outline that we've just done. So you don't need to make it long. I think 3 or 4 sentences is lots for this particular exercise. We were asked to address this email to the restaurant manager, so you can see we've started that way. We're just going to say, "Dear restaurant manager," and leave it at that. We don't need to spend a lot of time on that opening. But I'll read out loud what we've got here, and you can see how the details we considered earlier fit into sentence form. So we've got, "Yesterday evening, my husband, teenage son, and I dined at Valentino's Italian restaurant to celebrate my son's high school graduation. We've always enjoyed our meals at Valentino's, but last evening, the food and service were extremely disappointing. Since there was no manager on site when we dined, I would like to provide you with details of our visit and request a satisfactory resolution." Okay, so again, background context first, and then the purpose for writing comes next. So the reader should know by now what to expect in the rest of my email. Now, the second element or dimension that the raters are going to look at when they give you a score is your vocabulary. So they're looking for your word choice. They want to make sure that the words you're using are suitable for the task. So because we are talking about a restaurant experience, all of our expressions and so on need to relate to that topic, of course. But we also want to demonstrate a range of language. So it's great to have a nicely developed vocabulary with some descriptive language, higher level words that will impress the raters, but those words need to be used accurately, and they also need to be show a variety. We don't want to just repeat the same expression over and over again. So again, if we look back at that paragraph that we've just written and consider for a moment the level of vocabulary, I'd say that we've done a decent job of adding some specific, precise details. Again, we mentioned it was our teenage son, and we're there for a high school graduation. And look at some of the expressions, rather than say the food and service were awful, that would be common or simple language. We've elevated that expression a little bit. We've said the food and service were extremely disappointing. So that's adding a little bit of interest, I'd say. We've mentioned there was no manager on site, and we'd like to request a satisfactory resolution. So these expressions go a little bit above the common everyday usage of words. So that's what we're trying to achieve, to really showcase our best vocabulary. So that's our opening. You would progress on to paragraph 2, which, remember, talks about the problems that you had with the food. So again, this is where you're going to draw from your own experiences. So think of a terrible meal that you had and explain why it was so bad. You can create these details if you'd like, but it's often faster to actually base them on real life experiences. So sometimes when we dine out, or even if you cook at home, you might overcook the meal. I'm sure we've all had a meal like that. And remember, for this email, we've established in our opening that we are at an Italian restaurant. So to give an example of a dish that was overcooked at the restaurant, it makes sense in this case to talk about some sort of a pasta dish. Italian food is, a lot of it has noodles in it. So when noodles are overcooked, they get really soft and mushy. And that's not delicious at all, which is the point we're trying to make. So when I write this into my email itself, I want to be specific. Pasta could mean any number of things. There are so many different types. So let's be specific. So think of your favorite pasta, or just think of the first one that comes to mind. I'll go with spaghetti. That's a very common one, but at least I've been specific here. It's spaghetti noodles that were soft and mushy because they were overcooked. Now, for each paragraph you discuss, I would aim for at least 2 or possibly 3 specific examples, in this case of problems with food. So we've already got one specific example. Let's think of another example of an overcooked dish. And this one, unfortunately, comes from my own experience. I enjoy eating veal. It's a cut of meat, and I've had this at a very nice Italian restaurant in my neighborhood. But one time when I ordered it, it was so overcooked that it was dry. I could barely get my knife through it. So I couldn't eat it. It was terrible. And a really interesting word that means you couldn't eat it is inedible. So again, since we've got maybe a nicely developed vocabulary, you can use those words in the writing. That will add interest and again, elevate the score for vocabulary at least. So there are your 2 examples. That might be all you have time for, or perhaps you've met the word count and you don't need any more. But let's think of a 3rd example in case we need it to fill up that time and that word count. I think another common problem with food that we have sometimes is that it doesn't have much flavor to it. If you see a nice looking dish on the plate, but then you bite into it and you can't taste anything. So it's disappointing. So we can think of a specific example that relates here to the email. Again, we are at an Italian restaurant in this email. So let's choose another pasta dish. And if the pasta doesn't have very much sauce on it, sometimes it can lack that flavor. So once again, let's be specific. We mentioned spaghetti noodles above. So let's choose a different type of pasta to talk about this time. My favorite type of pasta is fettuccine alfredo. So I'm going to use that as my example. And if it doesn't have very much sauce, again, there's no flavor to it. And a really interesting word that you can use to describe that would be it's bland. So rather than say it had no flavor, we can say it was bland, and that's a higher level way of doing that. So there are the 3 examples with the problems of food. So when we write that into paragraph form on the test, this is it. It doesn't have to be long. We've got 3 sentences there. So again, I'll just read out loud what we've done here. We have: the food that we ordered was overcooked and flavorless. My son's spaghetti noodles were soft and mushy, and my husband's veal was dry and inedible. My fettuccine alfredo lacked sauce, so it was terribly bland. Okay, so again, we didn't add anything new here to the writing. We just took ideas that we thought about in that outline process, and we wrote them out in the same exact order even to make it easier for us. So let's move on to paragraph 3. We're doing the same thing in essence, but this time we're going to talk about problems with the service. So this is a new idea, right? Service is different from food. So we need a new paragraph to establish that. So once again, let's aim for 2 or 3 problems, specific problems with service. So one that I've experienced, and I'm guessing some of you have as well, is timing. So sometimes if a restaurant's really busy, you can wait an awfully long time before the server even comes to you. And I was once at a restaurant where I think we sat for about 20 minutes before the server even brought the menus to us. So that demonstrates really poor service. So I'm going to write about that. Another common problem that I've seen, it's happened to my party a few times, is that when we order an appetizer, which is a first course, that's supposed to come first. And then after we're finished eating, the main dish or the entree comes next. That's what's supposed to happen. But sometimes the timing gets mixed up and everything, the appetizers, the entrees, they all arrive at the same time. So we can establish that as a second example of poor service. So there's 2 examples. Again, that might be enough, but let's think of a third one together now, just for practice purposes. I think another classic example of poor service would be when you sit to dine and the dishes in front of you are dirty. Sometimes there might be spots on the silverware. There could be a human hair on your dinner plate. I don't know. You can make something up. Here's one that I've seen happen in a restaurant before, where you've got a wine glass in front of you and it's supposed to be clean for you to drink out of, but it's stained with lipstick. So somebody else clearly had a sip of that glass and the lipstick is caked into the glass itself, which of course is not appetizing. Nobody wants to drink out of a dirty dish. So we can use that idea in our writing. And to be descriptive, I'm just going to make up a color, just again, to paint a picture in the reader's mind. So you can imagine trying to drink out of a glass that has pink lipstick on the side. All right, so there are the 3 problems we've got with service. And again, we're going to just take a few moments, really. It shouldn't take as much time to write the sentences because you've already got your ideas. So this is what it looks like. We say, we sat at our table for 20 minutes before the server presented us with menus, and the appetizers we ordered arrived at the same time as the entrees. I was shocked to discover that my wine glass was rimmed with pink lipstick. And I'm going to add one more idea here. Not mine, with an exclamation. I really want to emphasize to the manager that this was the icing on the cake, as we say. It was just disgusting, and I didn't appreciate being served with a dirty dish. So I'll leave that in as is. All right, so we have talked about our content, and we've got lots of examples now, specific detail, and we've looked at some vocabulary. So all of those things are important. We're going to add on one more dimension now. This is the 3rd one that raters look at to give you a score for your writing. This one is called readability, and it has to do with how well you paragraph your ideas. We've been working hard on that. So far we've got 3 distinct paragraphs. Each paragraph talks about its own main idea. So I know we've been doing that part okay. Connectors and transitions, though, I'm not so sure. We really need to see how the paragraphs fit together to make sure that they're blended. So we're going to do that just next, just to double check if we need to add any transitions in. We, of course, need to make sure that the grammar and writing is correct. So far, I haven't noticed any major errors, so we'll maybe do a quick look at it at the very end, but I think we're okay with our writing. The sentence structure, though, I haven't been very careful on. Remember, it's okay to use a couple of short, simple sentences here and there, but we definitely want to include some level of complexity. So some complex, some compound, a couple of different structures as well to have variety. So here are those 2 middle paragraphs that we've already written. The first one's about food. Second one's about the service. So as I quickly skim read my work here, I notice a slight weakness right there. At the beginning of my 2nd paragraph, I start in with my examples. Do you see that? I start in by saying how we waited so long at the table. I haven't actually introduced my topic yet. I haven't indicated that the service was awful. So I'd like to add a very small sentence here to introduce that topic. And I'd also like to add in a transition to connect it more smoothly to the problems above. I still need to keep the food and the service problems separate, but they were both problems after all. So I'm going to introduce that topic and add my transition next. So this underlined sentence, I think we'll do that easily. It simply says, the service was disappointing as well. So by saying the service was disappointing, the reader now knows I'm shifting gears. I'm introducing a new main idea. I've identified that as poor service. And those words at the end, when I say as well, what I'm doing is I'm adding on. I already talked about problems with food up above. Now I'm talking about problems with service. So again, I've added a topic sentence and a transition in one, more or less. So that definitely strengthens the unity of the piece. So that's better. And last but not least here, let's have a look at our sentence structure. Again, I think our grammar is okay. I just want to make sure we've got enough evidence of complexity. So I'm going to pull out my laser pointer so we can have a look. This first sentence, it is a simple sentence. I've only got one subject and one verb. I have included a relative clause, so I guess that's something. This second sentence is longer and it is compound. There's my conjunction right there. This sentence is compound as well. I've used a different connector. Now, I recognize that these conjunctions are a little bit basic, but let's see what we've done down here if we've got more evidence of complexity. So we added in a short, simple sentence just to bridge these 2 ideas together. This sentence is nice and complex. It's long, first off, but it also has one conjunction here and a different type of conjunction here. So we've actually created a complex compound structure. And in the end of our paragraph, we added in this little bit. So this idea right now is inside what we call parentheses. So this little idea is called a parenthetical phrase. So using that structure is different. It does show a variety or a range. So I think for time's sake, I think we're okay with our sentence structure. We've done enough to show some complexity. So let's move on to paragraph 4 to make sure that we finish this email before the time is up. So the conclusion is, I think, probably one of the easier parts to write. All we need to do is offer up a quick summary of the main points we discussed. So remember, the whole point of writing this email was to tell the manager that we had an awful time. The food and service were terrible. So we'll include a little phrase that indicates that. We have to request the solution. We haven't done that yet, and the test instructions ask us to do so. So I think we'll go with a refund. That just seems to be a logical idea here. So we'll make the idea up here. I think a bill of about $128 is reasonable for 3 people. So by including the actual amount we paid, I think that's going to help strengthen the answer as well. And lastly, our next step, this is the easy part. You simply leave your contact details. So make up a phone number. And then I think just ask the manager to call you for further discussion if needed. So that part won't take long to do. So let's put these 3 little points into paragraph form again. Here it is. We've got, having eaten at Valentino's many times before, we were surprised at the poor quality of food and service that we received last evening. I respectfully request that the bill we paid, $127.39 in total, be refunded in full. Please reverse the charges to my credit card or phone me at this phone number if you require more information. Regards, Margaret Smith. So again, looking at this conclusion, you'll notice that the phone number that we've included there starts with a 555. There's no such phone number in the world as far as I know. So when you're making up a phone number, by starting with 555, you're protecting privacy. If you called that phone number, you would never get anybody. It doesn't exist. So I think that's a safe bet to use for phone numbers. The close off at the end there where we said regards, that's one of the most common ways to finish an email, at least in Canadian culture. So you can use that for just about any situation. So let's just go with that to make it easy. Remember, we are on a time limit. So we don't want to sit for 2 minutes thinking of a good closing remark. We start with a capital R for regards, and we put the comma after that. So that's proper format. You can use your own name if you want. A lot of us don't like to do that for privacy. I know I wouldn't on a test. That's just my choice. You can do so if you wish. But I just made up this name, Margaret Smith. I don't know if there even is a Margaret Smith out there. We just made up a name just to have one, because in an email, of course, you would have a signature at the end. So we have to fulfill that format too. So the very last thing we're going to talk about here today is the last element that the raters are going to consider before they give you the score for your piece of writing. So they're going to see how complete your answer is, first of all. And I'm confident that we've answered all parts of this question. We were asked to complain about food, service, and ask for a solution. And we did that in those bottom 3 paragraphs. So definitely we've addressed all points. We've given lots of specific example as well. So I know our answer is complete and all the details are on topic and talk about the food and service. So they're relevant. We haven't really addressed the tone and word count yet. So let's quickly do that now. So this is the entire email from start to finish, as you can see, with the greeting at the top, dear restaurant manager, all the way to the bottom with the signature. So on a testing situation, I'm hoping you've got about 3 minutes left at this point in time on the clock. And this is where you're going to proofread your entire piece of writing. So from top to bottom, make sure your grammar, your writing, everything is as strong as you can get it before that timer reaches 0. So as far as tone goes, it's hard sometimes to complain and still remain respectful, because the last thing we want to do is sound angry or accusatory. If we are rude, if we choose words that are really angry sounding, think about what the reader is going to do. They'll probably get upset and not want to finish your email. That would be the worst case scenario. So I think our tone still makes our case confidently. We still explain the truth that it was a terrible meal, but we use some really respectful language. So in our opening, we're saying things like, I would like to provide you with details. So we're softening that tone a little bit. I'd like to request a satisfactory resolution. So those words are fairly positive, even though we're making a complaint. In the concluding paragraph as well, when we go ahead and ask for that refund, that might be the hardest thing to do. Again, you notice we've added in some very respectful language. So we say, I respectfully request, and please reverse the charges. So I think our tone is appropriate here. We still sound direct and confident, but we're being polite and respectful. So that's a really good tone for this situation. Now you'll notice the word count at the bottom. And we established at the beginning that word count is supposed to be between 150 and 200 words. We have a 214 worded email. We have exceeded the word count a little bit, but the good news is that the raters are flexible. They will allow you up to 10% over or under the word count limit without penalizing your score. So 10% of 200 is 20. So that means that you could write 220 words for your email and you would not lose marks. So we're lucky in that sense. We've come in at 214, so it's okay. We don't need to take details out or add anything in. We've fulfilled the word count and we will not lose marks for that. So that's the good news. All right, just before we leave off for today, I'd like to summarize briefly your time management. Again, you have 27 minutes to write this, which is a fairly long chunk of time for such a short piece. But we still need to pay attention to the steps, I guess, that are involved. So I would say by the time you read the test questions, so this is where you're understanding the background context. In this case, we knew we were at a restaurant and had an awful time. And then you're reading the test instructions to figure out who you're writing to and which main ideas you're going to be talking about. So remember, the test gives you those 3 bulleted points. Sometimes there might be 4 bulleted points. So make sure you're addressing all of them. So that should only take 45 seconds, I'd say, just to read that over. You're spending a little bit more time actually thinking of your ideas. So make an outline. I strongly encourage you to write down your main ideas on paper and even jot down a couple of examples there if you can. I would not spend much more than about 3 minutes doing that though. Okay, by the time you're ready to start typing away in the test itself, you should know how many paragraphs you're writing and what the main idea will be of each of those. You can also fill in some specific examples as you're typing. Okay, so by the time you're starting to write the email, you've spent about 4 minutes, okay? First 4 minutes reading the question, thinking of those ideas and outlining. That will save you about 20 minutes or so to write the entire email from start to finish. And if you follow that plan, you'll have approximately 3 minutes left to proofread your work. And again, do read it from start to finish and make sure it is as correct and strong as you can get it. Hopefully it demonstrates your best work before the timer reaches 0. Okay, even if you finish a bit early, I would encourage you to use all 27 minutes available to you to read it back. And if you've got extra time, look at ways to add in a couple of adjectives or descriptive words here and there. Any little bit you can do will hopefully improve your score overall. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for today. I am going to stop sharing my screen so that I can come back to all of you. Hang on a second. Okay, hopefully I'm back.
Hi, Brandy. Yes, you are back. That was a great session. Actually, I learned so much, not just related to the test, but I mean, now that if I have complaints about stuff I purchased online, I know how to write an email. So thank you for that. If you guys who are watching, if you thought this was a great lesson, please give us a like. And also, when you do give us a like, we understand that you want more lessons like this. So do let us know in the comments or just hit the like button because Brandy has done a great job today. Thank you, Brandy. We do have a few questions here. I'm going to start with the ones we got in the beginning. So the first question is from Shobit Singh, and he's asking, I have a question regarding the vocabulary we need to use for this task. What level of vocabulary is expected from us to get a CLP 10 and above?
Okay, so I don't know how to answer what level of vocab. You're trying to use, I guess, as widely a developed vocabulary as you can. So the 2 things that you need to consider first off is to try to go above and beyond the common everyday words. So again, just thinking about what we've written today, talking about having an awful meal. So sure, we can say the food I had tasted bad, right? That's a very simple idea. We all understand the point, but it uses common language. So once we have that idea, it's a matter of adding in higher level specific nouns. So not just the food, you might just say the main entree, my veal cutlet, was so dry, I couldn't eat it. It was inedible. So you're looking at ways, again, to replace those everyday common language words with higher level words that aren't so commonly found or used. So it's not so much a certain level, it's just looking at the examples that afford you when you're writing about your topic. Every chance you get, you're hopefully adding in these extra higher level words. I think too, by taking a moment to add in some adjectives and adverbs. So remember, instead of saying we had a terrible time, we said the food was terribly disappointing. So again, we're taking a moment to add in those descriptive language words. So that's going to elevate the level of vocab too. So I guess that's part of it. And you mentioned the CLB, and I'll just explain to viewers who maybe aren't familiar with those. CLB stands for the Canadian Language Benchmarks, and the levels on the CELPIP test are graded to approximate those levels. So if you've studied an English class, particularly a LINC class, which is language instruction for immigrants and newcomers to Canada, you'll be doing lots of project-based activities where the teacher will give you a CLB level. So I think that's partly where this question is coming from Shobit. So again, on the CELPIP test, the level that you get there should be close. Now remember, your test situation, you have one response, and that's where you're getting your score. Whereas in a class, you have, say, 3 months meeting with your teacher several times a week. So that's why we say the levels approximate. And that's why, Shobit, I can't say exactly the level because of the nature of the test. But I'm hoping at least you've got some ideas about how to start elevating your vocabulary overall. Ashwati, you're muted.
Oops. Sorry, guys. Thank you for that answer. And I was just saying that Shobit has been really paying attention because we have quite a few questions from him. This is the next question we have from him. Do we need to answer the questions in the paragraphs in the order they are mentioned in the question, or can we do it in the order as we like?
Yeah, that is a great question. I'm glad you asked it. You can certainly choose to order your paragraphs any way you like. You absolutely must have paragraphs, though. Let's make that very clear. Everybody needs different paragraphs. The number of paragraphs you have will depend completely on the number of bulleted points in your instructions. So you're always going to have an introductory paragraph. That will never change. You're always going to open up the situation and state your purpose. But again, those middle points, today we had sort of the main ones were food and service. You can talk about them in the order we did, or you can switch them. You can start with service first and then complain about food. That part is up to you, as long as you have a logical reason to present those ideas in the order that you did. So clearly for our example today, when you request your refund, well, that part makes sense to do in the conclusion. You wouldn't put that in the third paragraph, why would you, right? So there has to be a reason for changing up the order. So yeah, you do have flexibility. There are, the good part about writing is it is subjective. There are so many different stylistic choices that you can make and still be correct. There are many different ways to approach different questions. Certain features you have to have though. So yeah, switch up the middle paragraphs, just make sure you're presenting them in a way that makes sense, and try to use transitions to connect them. As long as you do that logically and the reader understands you, it's fine, absolutely fine.
Thank you. And here's the next question from Shobit. And Brandy, let me know if you don't remember this part. It's a part from the presentation you just shared, but I don't want to trouble you to go back all the way. So we have an image if you don't remember.
Okay, perfect.
Why is there a colon after Dear Restaurant Manager instead of a comma, I'm assuming?
Oh, yes, I've seen it both ways. You know, I did use the colon. Yeah, some people use a comma, and I believe that you can use a colon as well, but I will double check on that from a business writing standpoint. Maybe a comma is more common now that you mention it. Yeah. Yeah, well, good point. You're keeping me on my toes, Shobit. I like it.
So just so that I understand it a little better as well, a colon is also used in emails to kind of after you address the person?
In some cases, I have in the past, commas are customarily used. So Dear Restaurant Manager, comma. In this case, I inserted a colon. So Shobit's saying, I'm not so sure it's meant to be a colon. I agree with Shobit, a comma would be better. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Shobit, for pointing that out. Very astute level of detail. Nice.
Okay. We have another question from Anmol. I'm going to show it here. You probably answered this already, Brandy.
Let's see.
Do we need to keep the different paragraphs word count similar to each other? Oh, no, you didn't answer this.
Yeah, no. It's a good question. I hadn't really considered it. I think if you're following sort of the formula for writing in general, when we write anything, whether it's an email or something else, we usually have a topic sentence that will introduce the main idea of the paragraph. And a rule of thumb is to have about 3 specific examples or supporting details. So if you follow that formula, your paragraphs would roughly be around the same length, but within reason. I mean, sometimes we have to think about the main idea we're discussing. There are certainly times where you just have more to say about one main idea than you do about the other. I would say try to balance them, particularly for this type of exercise. I mean, when you're writing a 200-word email in 27 minutes, you don't have a lot of time to really think about, oh, gee, I did 7 sentences here and 3. You know, in a real world situation, it might be a different matter than the test. But I would say, again, for your CELPIP emails, the paragraphs in the middle would be roughly the same. Because just look at what they're asking you to do. Complain about food, complain about service. There's only so much you could say about both of them and finish this in 27 minutes. So yeah, aim to have approximately the same length of writing, I'd say. Good question, interesting. I'd never really considered that, but I understand why you're asking, yeah.
Yeah, we have some great questions.
Yeah.
Here's another one from Ajay. During my exam, I had to invite someone to an event I'm organizing. I forgot to mention the place. How many marks would I lose?
You wouldn't, and thank you for asking that. Again, your score is given on the overall demonstration of those 4 categories we looked at. So when we're introducing the background context in our opening paragraph, we say we loosely try to address those 5 W's. So adding in who was there, when you went, where you were, and that sort of thing. Those are details of interest, but they don't change the point you're making. So the whole purpose of the email we wrote today was to complain about the food and service and ask for a solution. So if we forgot to actually say what restaurant we were on, that's probably not going to affect your score at all. You probably would maybe not even be noticed by the raters, provided that you're giving lots of relevant detail to fulfill the purpose for writing. I like to sort of, in my mind, I'm a very, I'm a very literal learner. I like checklists and to-do lists and rubrics. They keep me on track. So whenever I'm writing anything, I just sort of have the same formula in my mind. So if I can answer the 5 W's, I do it every time, I don't forget. So that just sort of comes second nature. But again, you're not going to lose a mark for omitting a detail about place when that's not even the point of the email. It's more important to talk about why you were there and what happened than it is to say where it was. Yeah, so good question, AJ. Don't worry about tiny little details like that. Add them for interest, but don't stress about them.
Thank you. Here's another question from Zaid. If I'm targeting 10 to 12 band, what are your 3 important tips, Brandy?
Okay, so yeah, level 10 to 12 would represent clearly the higher end. Again, there's not just one specific thing we can do to improve an entire level. So of those 4 dimensions we talked about, which is your content, your vocabulary, your paragraph format and grammar writing, and then your completeness of answering the question. Those 4 things have to show high level skills between the levels 10 to 12 in order for you to achieve in there more or less. Okay, so we can't just, I mean, clearly we need to have a very high level vocabulary that demonstrates a really large range. So you're using expressions very naturally and fluently, watching your tone, things like that. So you can work on that and have an incredibly high level vocab. But if you're still writing in short, simple sentences, you might not achieve that level 10. See what I mean? So it's sort of a package deal. But I would say the things to work on, again, vocab will help you in all parts of the test. It helps with your writing, clearly. You're speaking, you'll understand people, you're listening, and you're reading. So vocab is something to work on every single day if you can. Develop and learn these interesting words. So that would be 1. Your sentence structure is another one. And this one I find a little bit easier to study at home. I know in a pandemic world where we can't necessarily take a language class with a teacher right now, a lot of us are stuck studying on our own. But as long as you know how to structure a simple sentence with your subjects and verbs correctly, you can then start learning your different types of conjunctions. There are many different types. So there are 3 main groups. And look at ways to combine or connect those short, simple sentences together, but do it in different ways. You know, the first way we often learn, like a compound sentence, is we take those 2 short ideas and we join them with a word in the middle. So once you've got that down, start putting a joining word at the beginning and change up that structure. So by changing the structure and using different longer sentences correctly, you're also going to get up into the higher levels, okay, hopefully with your high level vocab. So those are 2 that you can work on at home as well. I think, again, like paragraphing skills are clearly important, because can you imagine if we'd have written this entire email today as one giant blob? And that happens often. People just submit this gigantic, like start to finish here. And I look at that and say, I don't even know where to begin. You're making me do all the work and figure out where those main ideas are. So clearly, if you're wanting to achieve a high level, we need to know how to structure. So paragraphing just makes it so much easier for your reader to follow you. And then they'll notice the wonderful sentence structure and vocab. So I would say those three things would be my top. I would check those off my list first and then go on to study other things. Good question, though.
Thank you, Brandy. So this is a popular episode and we're getting lots of questions, but I am very aware of the time, so I'm going to make it quick. Here's the next one from Shashi. Is there any grammatical mistake error pop up with another color?
Not so much grammatical errors, but on CELPIP, there is a spell check. So if you've written a word that the computer doesn't understand, it's going to underline that word for you in red. It will then provide you with a small list, maybe 3 or 4 other words that it thinks you meant to say instead. So it's up to you to look at the suggested words and then select the one that correctly states your idea. So it helps you to identify. It doesn't necessarily mean the computer is right, though, right? So sometimes, like if you've got a person's name, has this happened to you where you're typing your email, you type somebody's name? Well, of course, the computer says, what's this? I don't know this word. So if it underlines something, but you're confident you've got it right, that's fine. Just leave it. So the spell check is there for a little bit of a guide. But as far as grammar goes, you're on your own. That's one of the qualities that the raters look for under the readability dimension. So they look to see that your subject-verb agreement's correct, your verb tenses are consistent and correct, you don't have any sentence fragments and so on. So those are things, again, to study at home because you won't have any help with it on the test at all.
Thank you. Next question. We have to explain things specifically to connect with the reader. And I think this is in continuation to the previous question they asked, which you answered.
Yeah, so I think sometimes the tone that we are evoking will help to achieve the purpose of writing. So regardless of what you're writing, it's always about how the reader is going to receive it. So before you start typing away, consider how the reader will react. If you're using words, imagine in this situation we wrote today, and we wrote it in such a way that the reader is so angry halfway down and stops reading. Well, clearly I've not achieved my purpose. If I can't explain to him my situation and have him or her believe that I deserve a refund, well, then I've not achieved my purpose. So yes, of course, we absolutely want to connect with the reader and consider how they're going to react, because that's actually going to help you choose your words carefully, which will improve tone, but also help you fulfill your purpose, which is your task fulfillment. So we call that, I guess, from a business writing standpoint, we call that the you attitude. So in business, with companies and clients you work with, it's always about how can you deliver to the client while at the same time achieving your own needs. So I think sometimes when we use that approach, even for everyday situations like this, we are writing to a manager, after all, of a restaurant. We probably don't know the person. They're likely not a friend. So we have to phrase our ideas in a way that will connect with that person, at the same time stating our case and having them see our perspective, so that when we make our request, it will be logical and the manager will say, oh yeah, sorry, you do reserve that refund. So that's our ultimate goal. So absolutely try to connect with your reader every chance you get for any piece of writing, not just email on CELPIP, for any piece of writing. It's really important, I think.
Thank you. And I know I said last question, but we have one more question. and the reason I'm asking you this question is because I have had this doubt too. In my exam, formal letter to professor, I didn't mention my surname. Will it affect my score? So basically, do you have to mention your full name when it is a business email or something formal?
I think it's customary to sign, if you're writing to somebody you don't know well, like in the situation today, it's a restaurant manager that we probably haven't met. In that case, you would use your first and last name because they don't know you. So it just makes sense to do that. I think if you're writing, as you say, to a professor, it's somebody that you probably have somewhat of that professional relationship with, student teacher. I think in that case, if you just signed your first name, it would be okay. So once again, this sort of goes back to the last question. You're considering your audience first. So who's my reader, and does it make sense that I'm only putting my first name? In this situation, Shaz, I would say it probably does make sense, and I don't see why it would affect your score immensely. Even if you should have put your last name, again, that is one tiny little detail. It's not going to impact your overall score, provided that you've done a really thorough job of looking at all those other elements. Okay, so like if you got a level 9, for example, but you forgot your last name, you wouldn't just drop down to level 8. That's not how it works, luckily, right? So yeah, it's just a small detail. But good question. Again, consider your audience and choose what makes sense. In your case, I think it's fine for first name only.
Wonderful. And that's all the time we have for questions, guys. Thank you so much for reaching out to us, and thank you so much for asking your questions. If you have any more questions, please leave it in the comments below, and we will get it next time Brandy is here. Thank you so much, Brandy, for joining us and for doing this presentation. I know that it was really helpful, so thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, and I'll see you another time. Bye-bye.
Bye. So that was Brandy, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for commenting, and if you enjoyed this and if you want to see more of Brandy, please give this video a thumbs up, but more importantly, let us know in the comments below if you would like to watch anything similar. So I know that some of you commented about reading, about writing specific tasks. Let us know, but you should also know that we have a few tasks we have completed already, so please do check it out on our CELPIP Live playlist. We have some more exciting news for you. Over the past few months, we have been interviewing CELPIP test takers to hear about their experience and journey while writing the CELPIP test. We wanted for future test takers to have the opportunity to hear directly from test takers themselves. So please watch this space for CELPIP stories from past test takers. Who knows, you might see a familiar face. We have a small clip for you right here. Oh, I don't know why the clip is not playing, but it will play soon. But in any case, more importantly, if you want to share your story as well, if you have written the CELPIP test and you want to help out people who are writing the CELPIP test, who are going to write the CELPIP test, please let us know. You can write to communications@paragontesting.ca, or you can also fill in this form that we have. The link will be shared in the description soon. Okay, our next episode will be on Feb 23. So if you have questions you couldn't get answered today, please comment below or send us an email at communications@paragontesting.ca as well. We can address it on our next episode. You can also suggest topics you would like to see on our show, anything you'd like to learn about the test. I did not forget about the trivia question. The question was, the only desert in Canada is located where? And the question is, yes, there it is on the screen. And the answer to the question is British Columbia. Incognito Desert is the only desert in Canada, and it is located in British Columbia. You can also connect with us through any of our social media channels. All updates will be posted there first, so do follow us. Until our next episode, please stay safe and have a nice day. Bye.